The prairie never truly forgets. It remembers blood spilled into its soil, fires that swallowed homes, and promises broken beneath endless skies. Harry Cole felt those memories every time his horse's hooves struck the dry earth. Each step carried him closer to the land that had once been his and to the man who had taken everything from him. The Whitmore Ranch stretched across the horizon like a kingdom stolen in plain sight. Strong fences, wide barns, cattle grazing fat and unbothered. Prosperity built on lies. Harry stopped at the fence line and stared, his jaw tightening as the past clawed its way back into his chest. 8 years ago, this land had belonged to the Cole family. His father had been an honest man, respected by those who knew him and envied by those who didn't. Silas Whitmore had been both. When cattle went missing, Silas pointed his finger at the Coles. No evidence, no real trial. Just whispers, threats, and a rope thrown over a tree branch before dawn. Harry had watched from the trees, powerless and shaking, as the town he trusted turned its back. By nightfall, the Cole ranch was burning. By winter, his mother was buried beside her husband. Grief having finished what Silas Whitmore began. Harry survived by leaving, by hardening himself, by waiting. Now he was back, older and sharper, with a name that wasn't his own, and revenge riding beside him like a shadow. He had taken work as a ranch hand under false pretenses, blending in with the drifting cowboys who came and went. Silas Whitmore never looked twice at hired men, only at threats. Harry intended to become one. Then he saw her. She stood near the corral, sunlight catching in her dark hair as she brushed down a horse with practiced ease. She laughed at something one of the hands said, her voice light, unforced. There was dirt on her sleeves and confidence in her posture. Nothing delicate or spoiled about her. "That's Margarette," a cowboy beside him muttered. "Whitmore's daughter." The words struck harder than Harry expected. Margarette Whitmore. Harry had imagined her differently over the years. Cold, cruel, a reflection of her father's sins. Instead, she moved with quiet kindness, stopping to help a stable boy tighten a saddle strap, thanking the men who passed her. When her eyes briefly met Harry's, she offered a polite nod and a soft smile. It unsettled him more than hatred ever could. That night, Harry lay awake beneath the stars, the smell of dust and cattle heavy in the air. The land felt wrong beneath him, familiar, yet stolen. His plan was clear: stay, gather proof, and when the time came, make Silas Whitmore pay for every life he ruined. But Margarette's face lingered in his thoughts. She was part of the enemy's world, whether she knew it or not. Loving her even, noticing her, was dangerous. Feelings had no place in revenge. Still, as the prairie wind whispered through the grass, Harry realized something had already gone wrong. The land remembered the past, and now, so did his heart. Morning broke over the Whitmore Ranch in shades of gold and dust. Harry was already awake, boots on, saddle cinched tight. He welcomed the exhaustion of labor. It kept his thoughts quiet. Or at least, it tried to. Margarette Whitmore was harder to ignore in daylight. She moved through the ranch with purpose, not hovering above the work, but stepping into it. She carried buckets, checked fences, and spoke to the hands with an ease that made men straighten their backs without fear. Harry noticed how differently the ranch felt when she was near, lighter, almost honest. It didn't fit with everything he knew about the Whitmore name. Cole, was it? Harry stiffened. He'd chosen the name carefully, common enough not to stand out. Still, hearing it spoken made his pulse quicken. He turned to see Margarette, standing beside the water trough, sleeves rolled up, sunlight bright against her face. "Yes, ma'am," he answered. She frowned slightly. "You don't have to call me that. Margarette's fine." He nodded once. "All right, Margarette." She smiled at that, and Harry hated how easily it got past his defenses. They rode out later that morning to check the north fence line. The land out there was rough, sloping toward a dry ravine where the wind howled like a warning. Harry knew the area well. It bordered what had once been coal property. Riding there stirred memories he had buried deep. Margarette noticed his silence. "You've ridden land like this before," she said, not as a question. Harry hesitated. "Something like it." She glanced at him, curiosity flickering in her eyes, but she didn't push. Instead, she spoke of the ranch, of how her father planned to expand even farther north. "That land's cursed," one of the older hands had once said. Harry clenched his jaw. As they rode, a sudden crack split the air. Margarette's horse reared, panicked by a rattlesnake coiled near the trail. She lost her grip on the reins, her balance tipping dangerously close to the ravine's edge. Harry reacted without thinking. He kicked his horse forward, grabbed her reins, and reached for her arm. The moment stretched hoofbeats, dust, a sharp gas band. Then they were clear, both horses skidding to a stop. Margarette's breath came fast. Harry's hand was still gripping her sleeve. "You're safe," he said, voice low. She looked at him, shaken but steady. "You didn't hesitate." Harry released her quickly. "Couldn't." They dismounted, giving the horses time to calm. Margarette leaned against a fence post, her composure returning. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Most men around here think I shouldn't ride out at all." Harry met her gaze. They'd be wrong. Something shifted then. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. They spoke more freely after that. Margarette told him about growing up on the ranch, about a father who taught obedience instead of love. She admitted she stayed busy to avoid being trapped inside the house with his expectations. "My father believes power is the same as respect," she said. "I don't." Harry felt the old anger stir, tangled now with something softer. "You don't sound like him," he said before he could stop himself. Her expression tightened. "I try very hard not to be." That night, Harry sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames. He had come here for justice, maybe vengeance. Instead, he was learning the enemy had a daughter who carried kindness, like a quiet rebellion. And that was dangerous. Because if Silas Whitmore was the monster, Harry remembered, what would destroying him do to the days that followed, settled into a tense rhythm. Harry worked from dawn until the sky burned orange at dusk, his hands raw, his thoughts restless. The longer he stayed on the Whitmore ranch, the harder it became to separate the past from the present. Every fence post felt like a reminder. Every acre whispered his family's name. Silas Whitmore watched everything. Harry felt the ranch owner's eyes on him more often, now measuring, suspicious. Silas was a tall man, broad-shouldered despite his age, with a voice that cut clean and cold. He spoke little, but when he did, men listened. Not out of loyalty, out of fear. Harry kept his head down, but he listened. Whispers traveled fast among cowboys. Cattle that weren't counted. Brands burned over in the dead of night. Lawmen paid to look the other way. The same tricks Silas had used years ago. Lonely now, Harry was close enough to see the machinery behind the lie. Margarette, however, remained painfully unaware. She continued to speak to Harry when she could, sharing small moments that grew heavier with meaning. A cup of coffee handed to him at dawn. A quiet laugh when no one else was around. A shared ride where silence felt comfortable instead of strained. But Harry was unraveling. One afternoon, Silas ordered Harry to ride with him to inspect land along the northern stretch, the very edge of what had once been coal territory. The request wasn't casual. It was a test. "You don't say much, boy," Silas said as they rode. "Men who don't talk usually got something to hide." Harry kept his eyes forward. "Or nothing worth saying." Silas's mouth curved into something that wasn't a smile. "We'll see." They stopped near a burned-out foundation, half swallowed by weeds. Harry's chest tightened. He knew this place, the ground where his family's house once stood. Silas dismounted, surveying the land like a trophy. "This was trouble once," he said, cleared itself out. Harry's hands curled into fists. That night, Harry could no longer keep the truth locked away. He found Margarette near the barn, brushing a horse long after sunset. The lantern light cast soft shadows across her face. She looked up, when she sensed him, concern flickering in her eyes. "You're different today," she said. "What happened?" Harry swallowed hard. "I need to tell you something. And once I do, you might hate me." Margarette set the brush down slowly. "Try me." The words came out, rough, uneven. He told her his real name, told her about his father, the accusation, the rope, the fire that took his home. He told her who Silas Whitmore really wasn't, what he had come back to do. Margarette listened without interrupting. Her hands trembled as the story unfolded, tears streaking silently down her cheeks. When he finished, the space between them felt unbearably wide. "My whole life," she whispered, "has been built on stolen ground." Harry nodded. "I never meant for you to be part of it." She looked at him, then not with hatred, but heartbreak. "And now," Harry exhaled shakily, "now, I don't know." Margarette stepped closer, her voice steady despite the storm in her eyes. "If what you say is true, then my father deserves to answer for it." Outside, the wind rose, sweeping across the prairie like a warning. The truth was out, and nothing would be the same again. The prairie held its breath. Word spread faster than Harry expected. The full truth, but enough to unsettle the ranch. Men whispered near the bunkhouse. Riders came and went more often. Silas Whitmore felt it too. He grew sharp-tempered. His orders barked, his eyes restless. A cornered man was always the most dangerous. Margarette changed as well. She no longer moved blindly through the ranch. She watched, listened, asked questions, her father dismissed with threats or silence. Each evasion hardened something inside her. The kindness she carried didn't fade, but it gained a spine. Late one evening, she came to Harry with a bundle of papers clutched to her chest. "I found these in my father's office," she said quietly. "Old land deeds, livestock records, names crossed out and replaced." Harry's heart pounded as he looked through them. Proof more than he'd hoped for. "This could end him," Harry said. Margarette nodded, jaw tight. "Then it should." They planned carefully. Margarette sent word to the sheriff in the next county, a man not in her father's pocket. She convinced a few trusted ranch hands to stay close. Courage, Harry realized, was contagious when fear lost its grip. Silas sensed the net closing. The confrontation came at dawn, just as the sun crested the hills. Silas rode into the yard with a gun already drawn, rage burning through his composure. The ranch hands gathered, uncertain but unwilling to scatter. Harry stepped forward. "It's over, Whitmore," he said. "You don't own this land anymore." Silas laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You think a few papers and a sob story change the past." Margarette moved beside Harry, her voice steady. "No, father, but the truth does." Silas's eyes flicked to her, shocked. "You'd betray your own blood." "You betrayed yours first," she replied. The air snapped. Silas raised his gun. Harry moved at the same instant. The shot rang out, then another. Dust exploded near Harry's feet. He fired once, aiming not to kill, but to disarm. Silas's gun flew from his hand, clattering across the dirt. Silence followed, thick and stunned. Before Silas could reach for another weapon, riders thundered into the yard. The sheriff dismounted, eyes sharp, badge catching the light. "Silas Whitmore," he said, "you're under arrest for murder, fraud, and theft of land." For the first time, Silas looked small. As he was led away, his gaze locked on Margarette, not with anger but disbelief. "Everything I did," he said hoarsely, "was for this ranch." Margarette didn't flinch. "No," she said. "You did it for yourself." When they took him, the ranch exhaled. Men removed their hats. Some nodded at Harry. Others looked at Margarette with something like respect. But victory didn't feel loud. Harry stood alone at the fence line later, watching the sun climb. The land looked the same, wide, endless, but something in it felt lighter. Margarette joined him. "You could leave now," she said softly. "No one would stop you." Harry met her eyes. "I thought about that, and I spent years believing justice would feel like fire," he said. "Turns out it feels like standing still, and not hurting anymore. She smiled faintly. Stay. It wasn't a command. It was a choice. And Harry realized, standing on land that once broke him, that for the first time in years, he wanted to choose the future. The weeks after Silas Whitmore's arrest passed slowly, like a wound, learning how to close. The Whitmore ranch stood quieter than it ever had, not empty, but thoughtful. Men worked without fear, snapping at their heels. Laughter returned in small, careful doses, as if the land itself was relearning how to breathe. Margarette inherited everything by law, but she did not accept it lightly. She walked the property line by line, reading old markers, listening to stories from ranch hands who had been too afraid to speak before. Harry rode with her often, pointing out places he remembered from his childhood: the creek where his father taught him to fish, the hill where his mother used to watch the sunset. I didn't know, Margarette said, one evening, standing on that same hill, about any of it. Harry looked across the prairie, the sky painted in gold and red. You weren't meant to. Silas Whitmore's trial sent ripples through the county. Other men were named, other lies surfaced. For the first time in years, the truth wasn't buried, it was loud, and once spoken, it could not be undone. Harry planned to leave. He packed quietly, before dawn, believing that staying would only complicate things. Justice had been served. The past faced. What place did he have here now? Margarette found him at the stable, saddle already on his horse. So that's it, she asked. Harry sighed. I don't want to take something that isn't mine. She stepped closer, her voice firm. You're not taking anything. You're coming home. He shook his head. This ranch carries your name. Not anymore, she said. She handed him a folded document, a new deed. The name at the top read, Cole Ranch. Harry stared at it, stunned. You don't have to do this. I do, Margarette replied, because the land was stolen, and because the future doesn't belong to my father or his sins. Silence stretched between them, heavy but hopeful. Harry swallowed. What about you? She smiled, soft but sure. I'm staying. This is my home too, if you'll have me. The decision settled in his chest like peace. They rebuilt together, fences repaired, fields restored, old wounds acknowledged instead of ignored. The ranch became something new, not ruled by fear, but by fairness. Neighbors returned, trade resumed. Children laughed where gunmen once stood. At night, Harry and Margarette sat on the porch, watching stars spill across the sky. The land still remembered its pain, but it was learning something else now: forgiveness. One evening, Margarette rested her head against Harry's shoulder. Do you ever think about revenge anymore? Harry considered the question carefully. Sometimes, but not with anger, just as a reminder of how far we came. She nodded. The land remembers. So do we, he said. But memory no longer chained them. It guided them. As the seasons turned, the Cole Ranch flourished it, because the past was erased, but because it was finally honored. Harry no longer rode as a ghost chasing justice. He rode as a man who had found a tand, found love where he least expected. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, no longer marked by ashes, but by promise. And for the first time, the future felt wide open. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.